Here they go, complaining again. Seriously? I mean, these are the people that just got freed from Egypt. They just got freed from slavery. All this stuff was given to them of jewelry and clothes and all this stuff. They saw this miraculous parting of the waters. The feet aren't even on the other shore, and they're already starting to complain. And then I turned on Facebook, which is Complain Book. And then if you notice any news source, and I don't care what news source you're reading, the talking heads and the pundits are all complaining. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I'm a priest. Complaining. Be a priest, you hear complaining within the first 5 seconds of your ordination, right? Things haven't changed in 3,000 years. So I started to dig. What's the psychology behind complaining? Why do we as humans complain? Found some really cool articles on Psychology Today. What's fascinating about, and I was kind of laughing as I'm reading this because they're coming at it from a very secular notion, but they're talking about is we as humans have a tendency and lean towards the negative. Now I'm seeing everything that we've been talking about, right? Ever since the fall, we lean towards the culture of death. We lean towards the negative. In fact, modern psychology is finding out that people that complain have more stress in their lives, they're less happy, they're more sick, which is fascinating, because the neurons in your brain when you complain weave tightly around each other. Complaining, they've been finding out, actually shrinks your brain. How about that? Shrinks your brain. And because those neurons are wrapped tight, it becomes a habit. So we just continually focus on complaining. The average person complains 30 to 50 times a day. Think about your own life. 30 to 50 times a day because we have been warped into that habit to always complain. But why do we complain? The article gave 5 reasons. 1, sometimes we complain to build solidarity. You ever be in the checkout of the grocery store? You meet someone for the first time at a cocktail hour. Boy, the weather in Columbus is miserable, right? This month it's too hot. In February it's too cold. But notice we start to complain. And why are we complaining to people that we just met? Because we're trying to find some similarity with them. We're finding some commonality with them. But notice we're not doing it in a positive way. We come at it in a negative way. Because it's easier for people to have a common enemy than it is to have a common good. And so we complain to build solidarity. Is that what the Israelites were doing in Egypt? Here's a people who just got free from Egypt. And they're constantly complaining in the wilderness. But is that because they're being made into a people and they're trying to find solidarity with each other? So let's just find something constantly to complain about? But notice it's the old tapes of complaining. You brought us out here to die. Sometimes we complain because we don't want to take action. We don't want to fix the problem we're complaining about. It's easier for us just to complain about it. I'll have people come and meet with me, and they start talking about some negative thing they're going through, and I'll give them advice and a way out of it, and they complain about the advice, right? Because ultimately, they have no desire to fix the problem. It's easier just to not take action and complain about it. Sometimes we complain to build superiority. You ever been behind a Columbus driver when it rains? They're horrible. It's like these people have never seen water before, right? Traffic is horrible. Notice when we complain that way, what are we doing? I'm a better driver in the rain. I just want to let you know that. And everyone else is horrible. If you notice in that Exodus reading, who are the Israelites complaining to? They're not complaining to God. They're complaining against Moses. And who is Moses? Their leader. I could do it better, Moses. I'm sure I could have got us water. So in complaining, we're trying to get superiority over people. What else did the article say? Oh, sometimes we complain to control other people's opinions. When I first got here, people found out very quickly that I'm a Notre Dame fan. I don't have scarlet and gray in my wardrobe. And I had people saying to me, why are you rooting for Notre Dame? They're a horrible team. Now, granted, some years that's true, right? Whatever. But I kept getting that. Why aren't you a Buckeye? Why are you? Notre Dame's horrible. Because ultimately, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. But people wanted me to feel better about their own team and their own opinion. So sometimes we complain because we want to validate our own opinions and we want people on our side. Sometimes complaining takes control. Sometimes we complain to excuse poor performance. A singer in front of people who messes up may say, oh, allergies have been so bad, my throat's been bad. That's really not remembering that that person forgot to practice. Or a spouse who says to the other spouse, I was just so busy today, when you forget an anniversary or a birthday. We do it with church a lot too. Oh, I'd come to Mass more, but Mother so-and-so preaches too long. Or Father so-and-so, he's too high church or too low church. Or they didn't sing my favorite hymns. No, you're spiritually dead, and you don't want to take ownership of your faith. You want to put your infant mouth in you want your spiritual diapers changed. We don't want to take ownership for discipleship. So sometimes we complain because of our own excuse for lack of responsibility. So what do we do to change complaining? Because it's at this point where our human psyche and our society always leans towards the negative. How do we break it? The story tells us. If you notice, when the people are complaining, they're complaining to Moses. And then when Moses complains to God is when the answer comes. How often into our lives do we constantly complain to everyone? We put these big treatises up on Facebook. We complain to everyone in earshot, but we never sit in prayer and actually bring our grievance to God, who is the one who could fix it. When was the last time we just sat in quiet and meditation instead of raging about our complaints? Very rarely do we do that because we want validation from others and really don't want the problem fixed. Another way is to be less judgmental. Take a look, if you open up your sheets to page 8, that reading of St. Paul should actually now make sense. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. The whole point we talked about, one of the things of complaining is to gain superiority. But St. Paul tells us the opposite. Think of other people's interests, and other people is ahead of yourself. And it's when you do that that you actually find yourself, because we stop yielding towards the culture of death and open ourselves up to the empire of life and love. Let each of you look not to your own interest, but to the interests of others. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. And what was the mind of Jesus? Though he was in the form of God, he did not deem equality with God something to be grasped. Rather, he emptied himself, taking the form of a slave. Take responsibility is another way to stop complaining. If you're complaining about something that you have the power to fix, then fix it. Roll up your sleeves and fix it. And if you're complaining about something you don't have the power to change, then look for the positive in it. Could you imagine how the world would change if we did those two things? If you're complaining about something you have the power to fix, you actually fix it and stop complaining. And if you don't have the power to fix it, you look for the positive in it. That's another thing. If we're complaining 30 to 50 times a day, how many times are you saying positive things a day? That article I read talked about anytime you feel yourself headed towards the negative complaining path, you stop and make a positive of it. Now, you don't do what Southern people do, right? Oh, that woman is such an idiot, bless her heart. Right? That's not a positive on top of, that's a negative, right? But trying to find the positive in the midst of the situation. I always tell this story. One of my favorite saints is St. Teresa. She's sometimes called the Little Flower, and she was a young Carmelite nun, and there was an elderly Carmelite nun who always sat in front of her in chapel. And that nun had rosary beads in her hand and was constantly banging the beads on the pew in front of her. Click, click, and it was driving her nuts. And in her spiritual autobiography, she talked about how she would complain and rail against that nun. Why is she praying like that? Banging those beads off that pew. It's driving us all crazy. And then she heard the Lord one day in prayer say, that's how I'm teaching you patience. She actually became friends with that sister and realized those banging of the beads is because that nun was praying for the young nun behind her. So often we're so engulfed in complaining that we forget about the positive, and that woman was actually praying for her. And through it, God was teaching her patience. But she would have missed all that if she would have continued in the land of complaint. We need to lean towards the positive, and it's not easy. I challenge you, try to spend the next 7 days of this week not complaining once. You can already feel your skin crawl, right? Right? Because it's such a habit now, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy because we're programmed to the negative. But if you could break the cycle this week and retrain your mind and start speaking positivity into the world instead of negativity, you will see your life totally change. You will be much more at peace and whole. Why? Because God is now separating Egypt from you. Just like the Israelites who couldn't give up the slavery of Egypt, God is slowly, by his grace, chipping away Egypt so you could live in the freedom of the sons and daughters of God.